The honourable member for Caribou Prince George.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I rise to speak to Bill C-29, an act to provide for the establishment of National Council for Reconciliation. Reconciliation. What does that word mean? In 9 years of this government, what we have seen is the word reconciliation, I believe, just become a buzzword. Reconciliation is about walking shoulder to shoulder by listening, by learning, by being open to admitting wrongs were done. C-29 is in response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action 53 to 56. I'll remind this House that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was founded by our former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, our former government, Conservative government. Now, throughout these conversations, there's always finger pointing that goes on. And I would hazard that there's enough blame to go around from all sides. And Speaker, we have seen in the last 9 years through this government picking winners and losers, First Nation pitted against First Nation, First Nations pitted against non-First Nations, Métis versus Métis, Métis versus non-Métis. We have seen our Prime Minister thank indigenous protesters who are just protesting simply the fact that the boil water advisories in their communities still are ongoing. And what did he do when they were at his fancy function? Is he thanked them for their donation. We've seen him cast away the first Indigenous female Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, who spoke truth to power and was cast aside, Madam Speaker. We have seen this Prime Minister who has stood there with his hand on his heart and dabbing away a fake tear with a tissue, saying this is his most important relationship. And yet, as we've just heard, they just launched their 9th budget and not a mention of reconciliation for Indigenous peoples. So pardon me if we seemed a bit skeptical about what they're planning with C-29. Now, Speaker, over the time of mine being elected, whether it's my current file in mental health and suicide prevention, or previous files, transportation, or fisheries, this government likes to say that they've consulted. And is it really truly consultation or engagement, or is it simply merely checking the tick box, or a check mark in a box on a sheet saying this is what you have to say and you have to complete? True engagement means sitting at the table and fully understanding all sides. What brought us to this point? Recent years, we've heard the horrors of our residential school program, but the world is just waking up to what some of us have heard for many years. The horrors that were our residential school program, a program that was designed to drive the Indian out of the children. Thousands upon thousands of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children taken from their homes and never returned. Madam Speaker, if you've ever sat with a residential school survivor, if you ever listened to their stories, it is horrible. The start of the ground sonar search in my riding of Caribou Prince George, the ground sonar search at the former St. Joseph's Mission School, residential school in my hometown of Williams Lake. I'm on record as speaking that I grew up just down the road from this school, and yet I had no idea of the horrors that were going on at that school. These were kids that I played with, that many of them I know to this day that are my friends, indeed are my family, as my family is First Nations as well. But watching a residential school survivor come to the lands for a ceremony marking the start of the ground sonar search, and watching them shake as those memories, and become so emotional as those memories come flooding back. It's absolutely heartbreaking. You know, in 9 years of this government, they have only fully implemented 11 of the 94 calls to action, and only 8 of the 76 calls that are the federal government's responsibility. Why did it take 4 years for the Liberals to implement this after the Prime Minister made the announcement about it in 2018? Why are they still not bringing in or listening to all of the Indigenous groups that want to be part of this? The Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, an organization that represents over 800 status and non-status off-reserve urban Indigenous peoples, and the Native Women's Association of Canada, an organization that represents women and children on and off reserve. At the committee, our Conservative team, Bloc and NDP, passed the motion to include these 2 national organizations at Council. However, when the rubber hit the road, when it really came time to make sure that they were part of it, our NDP colleagues sided with our Liberal friends, their Liberal friends, and voted to exclude the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, effectively silencing the voices of 800,000 off-reserve Indigenous peoples. Why? Reconciliation is about inclusion. Reconciliation is about recognizing economic prosperity, allowing our Indigenous peoples to recognize, or allowing Indigenous peoples, Indigenous communities to recognizing full potential. This is unbelievable that we're still debating this bill. The fact that this bill is still here, the fact that we're still in the process of debating it after having numerous amendments, speeches, just speaks to the government's failure to meaningfully consult and advance this issue. Now, they're going to stand up and say that I guarantee you we're going to hear it at one point that it's been blocked, there's been lots of dilatory motions from this side. They have the majority, Madam Speaker. If they want to push something through with their NDP colleagues, they can push it through. Now, our Conservative colleagues worked diligently at the committee to improve the bill. Isn't that the message we always say? Just let it pass. Let's get it to committee, and we'll make it better there. But again, what we've heard that they blocked and they left out those two important groups. We talk about consultation. Does it really truly represent the work that they've done, or the consultation that's done? Does it truly represent all the Indigenous people, or does it just simply reflect the views and those that are friends of this Liberal government? We know recently that there are about 113 Indigenous groups in Ontario that are taking this government to court over boil water advisories. This government talks a good game, Madam Speaker, but the truth is in their actions. As important as this bill is, it also highlights the failure of a Liberal government to listen to Canadians and to listen meaningful and to consult with Indigenous peoples. This is, of course, not the first time we've spoken about the Liberals' inability to consult and listen. They always seem to just go down the path and tick the boxes of the groups that are in agreement with them, and they use that as their record of consultation. Yet they have left a whole section, a whole community of Indigenous peoples out in this when it pertains to C-29. You know, here's a concern that we have, is that time and again we see these bills that come forth and it's not perfect, and then the consequences are faced afterwards. Now, you'll hear comments from the other side that say, well, we should never let perfection get in the way of getting something done. You know, I've talked about winners and losers with this government. I'll talk about my friend Chief Willie Sellers in Williams Lake. Here's a chief of his community that, in all sense of the word, is leading by example. Isn't waiting for the government to provide handouts, has done everything to lead his nation and his community to economic prosperity. Ellis Ross, a provincial MLA in British Columbia, walks the walk. I remember sitting in a meeting or a presentation with him about 10 years ago, and he said this: we don't need all these fancy words. We don't need to listen to an unelected group, the United Nations, the calls to action. He says, what we need is government to get out of the way, to allow us to chart our own path forward. You know, is this council going to be yet just another arm of the minister of the day? These are questions that we have. Will this government even listen to the National Council? They've spent the last 9 years of over-promising and under-delivering on Indigenous issues. How many communities still have the boil water advisories? It's unbelievable to this day. I remember one of the first speeches that we did in this House, one of the first emergency debates that we had was the suicide epidemic on Attawapiskat First Nation. Speaker. And it was heartbreaking for me to hear the stories that we were hearing. Sadly, have things gotten better for Indigenous peoples in the last 9 years under this government? when in 2015 the Prime Minister stood and promised that this was his most important relationship. It is complex. I will give them that. But if it truly was his most important relationship, when they've just announced so much spending in a budget that we now spend more money servicing our debt than we do on health care, and the books were open, the safe was open, they were throwing money at everything, yet not a mention of Indigenous peoples or reconciliation. It's frustrating. And what will be measured with this council? What gets measured gets done. So we Conservatives will be supporting this bill because we believe in the premise that we have to have everyone around the table. That true reconciliation begins with understanding, begins with, as I said earlier on, listening. Open heart, open ears, open eyes. My concern with this government is that this is just yet another, as I said earlier on, just to placate those. There's no real meaning or value behind doing this. It's frustrating that we're here. I've already mentioned this once earlier on in my speech. It's frustrating that we're debating this today when this could have been done previously. 9 years, as I get heckled from the other side. 9 years they've had to get this done. And now, in the 11th hour of the last few shreds of power that they have, they put this forward. It's taken forever for them to do this. Madam Speaker, with that being said, as I mentioned, we will be supporting this bill. We hope that we can see some amendments being done that we put forth. We hope that all Indigenous peoples are included at the table. The Congress, the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, as well as the Native Women's Association of Canada, are two organizations that we feel should be included in this and should have a say, at least one director around the table. And with that, Madam Speaker, I thank you for this time. I thank you for the colleagues for listening, and I'll take the questions. Thanks.